This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you are all well. Thank you for joining us today for our first virtual happy half hour. What we're hoping to do is have talking topics that are interesting to our industrial partners here in St. Lucie County. And we are really excited to welcome our two guests this evening to join us and talk about the PPP program, which is a hot topic. Some new information coming down with the Flexibility Act. So we're very pleased to have Congressman Brian Mast with us today. And then following Congressman will be Tom Sennett from A1 Roof. And he is going to help us learn a little bit more about the process in application for the PPP program and reporting. Our president of the St. Lucie EDC is also on the line with us today, and that is Pete Tesh. So I will hand it over to him to say a few words, and then we will roll out our presentation. Make sure you have your beverage of choice for our happy half hour.
Thanks so much, Jill. And I have a tall glass of cold water. But anyway, welcome.
The non-alcoholic happy half hour?
Welcome to our happy half hour, and Congressman Mast, we're delighted that you can join us. Thank you for your service to our country and all that you do for us, representing our community up in Washington. And Tom, thanks for joining us. These are two really important topics about the PPP, where we are, the flexibility of this, and how do we report it. So thanks to both of you gentlemen, and also all of our participants on the call. So Jill, I'm going to hand it back to you, and thank you for coordinating this.
Just for those on the line today, we'll start with Congressman Mast, who will be talking about the new PPP Flexibility Act. What we'd like to do is, it's very informal. We'll have the Congressman speak. And then if you would like to ask some questions, we were going to have the chat box going, and you could just put it in that you'll have a question. And as soon as the Congressman finishes talking, we'll have a little open Q&A, and then move on to the next presentation. So with that, Congressman, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, very glad to join you. Audio is good now?
Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, we got to work with Tom and A1 a little bit on something that we've been working on out of my office, is what we call a virtual jobs fair, where for anybody that's paying attention to this, we are trying to put up every single job that somebody is hiring for within driving distance of the community that I represent, so that as we get people calling our office saying, can you help us with state unemployment or CARES Act unemployment or whatever it is, while we're doing that, simultaneously, we can ask them, what were you furloughed from? And hey, oh, by the way, we know somebody that's looking to hire in this space as well. So I'd just put that out there before I get going, that if anybody out there is hiring, please reach out to our office, because we're putting that up there. We'll make an announcement about it. We'll come to your job site, and you can tell people about the job you want to hire them for, whatever the case is. But we want people to know that there's a lot of work out there as they're dealing with some of the issues related to the COVID-19 epidemic. Moving away from that piece of it and moving into the Paycheck Protection Program, which we have also fielded, at one point probably 150 calls a day on, maybe more, for over a month straight. We're going to talk about some of the changes that were made with what's known as the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act, which, when you talk about that system, you're talking about basically $1 trillion that was moved into the hands of small business owners in a system that was set up really over the course of about a week and implemented about a week later. There was definitely growing pains, but really kind of amazing when you think about it in terms of the time frame of what happened. So talking about some of the concerns that we've heard from small business owners and the needs to give them some more freedom on how and when loan funds can be spent, while at the same time retaining forgiveness of that loan. And exactly what the name of the bill is the Flexibility Act for this. So these changes Number one, they're retroactively effective for the date of the CARES Act enactment. So anybody applies to any and all outstanding Paycheck Protection Program loans. These changes apply to you. There's not separate groups of people. If you already have a loan or you've been working through it or whatever the case is, this applies to you regardless of when you got it. So here's some of the main provisions of it. Number one is timeline extension. So under the old PPP, I'll just refer to it as the PPP, borrowers had 8 weeks from the time that they received the first loan installment to spend the funds in order to be fully forgiven. Now, the Flexibility Act, this changes to this. What it does, it extends that period out to 24 weeks. So it went from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, not to go beyond December 31 of this year. Now, you still have the option to keep the original 8-week spending period if that's the track that you were already on and that's what you want to do. It doesn't prohibit you from doing that, but extends it out if that's a benefit for some people. Now, some businesses. One of the other things that it does is what's known as the 60-40 rule. The original PPP loan, the guidelines mandated that 75% of any forgiven amount, it had to be spent on payroll costs, while the other 25% could be used on mortgage interest, rent, utility payments, things like that. Here's what's changed. With the Flexibility Act, now the payroll requirement is 60% be used for payroll, leaving 40% for other expenses. And if that's your ratio, then everything could still be fully forgiven. So that's what it went to. It went from 75-25 to 60-40, still allowing everything to be forgiven on that. That's the numbers to remember. Also, one of the other important points is the rehiring deadline. So the Flexibility Act gives businesses up until December 31 of 2020 to rehire workers in order for their salaries to count towards the forgiveness. Now, under the original Paycheck Protection Programs, all workers had to be rehired by June 30, which is right around the corner. So that's a big change right there as well for those dates, allowing you that flexibility in hiring as well. As hopefully, maybe things are still in the process of ramping up, but you can still have those loans forgiven. Now, the rehiring requirements for the flexibility, it adds a few additional exceptions as well for businesses to receive forgiveness, even if they don't restore their entire workforce by December of 2020. It states basically this, that the businesses can receive loan forgiveness on payroll amounts if they're unable to rehire an individual who was an employee on or before February 15, or are able to demonstrate an inability to hire similarly qualified employees before December 31. So those are a few flexibility items there. Also, if they're able to demonstrate an inability to return to the same level of business activity as such business was operating prior to February 15 of 2020. So if you can demonstrate those inabilities, there will be flexibility in that as well. Couple of other quick things here. So extension of repayment term, that's an important one for anybody that's paying it out. You like to know what are those terms, right? So with the Flexibility Act, it allows businesses 5 years at 1% interest to repay the loan. Again, 5 years at 1% interest. Previously, the loans were required to be paid back in 2 years. So, the first payment will be deferred for 6 months after the SBA makes the determination on forgiveness. And then last point that I want to make is tax deferral. With the Flexibility Act, it lets businesses that took a PPP loan to also delay paying their payroll taxes. So those are all the points that I have on the Flexibility Act. If you all need me to repeat something on that, let me know. I'm happy to do so. If you all have any questions, let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them, or else I'll take down your information and try to get you the correct answer if I don't have it.
Are there any questions? No, there's no questions. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask on the PPP program or the Flexibility Act at this time? You can just go live if you'd like. I know there was a question, Congressman, with regard to the 2 years at 1% and then moving to 5 years. Previously, they had indicated that if you had an existing loan, it remained at that 2 years. Are you able to confirm if that now is 5 years at 1% as held at year?
Yes, as I said, all provisions of the Payroll Protection Flexibility Act will apply to all loans, all Paycheck Protection Program loans.
Any other questions? Anything else coming down, Congressman, that you can share with us that may be of interest for our industry partners at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you some speculation on some things, but it's just that. I mean, I would say something that's a little bit more staggering to me as a member of Congress, and that is this: the calendar for the rest of the year. So there's basically 7 months left in the year. The calendar for Congress has recently been released by the Speaker, and we are only in Washington for another, I want to say it's 42 days. Out of the next 7 months, she only has us there 42 days. Now, why is that a big issue? There's obviously a lot of big issues to deal with. And a lot of you probably remember the Paycheck Protection Program loans basically running dry for a little bit over a week. Now, everybody in Congress knew this was going to happen, but we weren't allowed to be in session. The Speaker didn't have us in session. So it's an issue that went unresolved for over a week, causing a great deal of disruption for folks that were, let's say 4th and goal on getting their loan. This is the kind of thing that has the potential to happen when we're not in DC discussing what's going to go on with unemployment and the CARES Act unemployment and the ending of that. Is it going to end cold turkey? Is it going to be continued out longer? Is it going to be reduced by $100 every week subsequently until it ultimately comes down to the amount of zero? These things, they're not being debated in Washington, and that's a very serious issue. There's things that some of us are pointing towards saying, listen, we want to see big investments into infrastructure, right? If Washington's going to talk about something that passed the House but is not going to go anywhere in the Senate, a bill a couple of weeks ago that spent roughly $3 trillion, some of us would rather say, listen, take those dollars and make it a investment in America and an investment in jobs by investing in American infrastructure, by going out there and giving bonds to cities and municipalities and states and things like that to invest in their infrastructure. So there will be more conversations about things like that. I'm pushing that conversation, but the toughest thing that I can tell you is this: we're not spending a lot of time in Washington between now and the end of December, which means a lot of those things just don't get over the finish line or get delayed or end up not happening until after they should have happened already.
Well, thank you for that update. I want to let everyone on our happy half hour today, if you're not following Congressman Mass on Facebook, please do. He does some terrific Facebook Lives with up-to-the-minute information, and they really are very informative. And every now and again, his son Major comes on there, and I'm a big fan of Major. He's a new addition to Congress, as I asked where is he today. But not only is he adorable, but honestly, Congressman gets on quite often, and he updates us. We learn a lot from him, from these Facebook Live posts, so it's real easy. And on the virtual job fair, please, if you have jobs, please let us know. Please let the congressman know. We certainly want to put as many people back to work. The new unemployment dashboard at the state of Florida now has 15.7% of the residents in St. Lucie County unemployed through the unemployment system. So the more that we can post and get people transitioned, we appreciate the congressman's efforts in that. So without further ado, thank you, Congressman Mass, for joining us. So you're welcome to stay on the line. Tom's going to give us some really good information on helping our businesses get ready for that reporting with some of the tools and resources he's using, not only with his background as a CPA, but also as the controller. So thank you very much. And Tom, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I want to just go through like kind of a 9 steps of things that you that folks here might find helpful as far as administering and ultimately reporting back in and trying to get loan forgiveness for the PPP as well as the PPP Flexibility Act. So the 9 steps that I'd suggest are, number 1, know your laws. And there's really 3 laws that are out there right now. There's HR 748, and if you Google this stuff, you'll find it on the internet, and you can read the actual law. What does it say? Within 748, that's the whole CARES Act. PPP is sections 1102, 1101, and 1106. And if you break that down, 1101 and 1102, they define how the whole program works. And then 1106 tells how you get loan forgiveness, which everybody's interested in because converts it from a loan to money from the government. You don't have to repay it. The modifications then are HR 266, which was just the piece that applies to the PPP is just extending the amount that's available from the initial 349 billion that Congressman Mast was talking about. And then HR 710, that was just signed by President Trump last week, is the PPP Flexibility Act. So if you have those pieces in mind, you can go right to reading exactly what's going on. And they're not actually all that complicated, especially, as I'll talk a little bit later on, the Flexibility Act is extremely brief. Next one. So then the next level you want to look at is what is the agency saying, and in particular the Small Business Administration. So if you just Google it and look at come up, you should find these 2 websites, the Coronavirus Small Business Guidance. It's really got all sorts of information, not just about PPP, but all the other programs. And then you can also find their frequently asked questions for lenders and borrowers. The next 3rd topic. Then those frequently asked questions, you can get some information directly from the SBA, but you might find it useful that if you just spend every day or 2, whatever, just go over to Google and type in PPP FAQ, and then look at what comes up first, and you'll see, have they added any new frequently asked questions? They're up to number 48 as the last time I checked, which was this afternoon. And you can just keep going and seeing has anything new been added. It's important to also look at the dates that those questions have because some dates may be, they're like the effective date. So you may want to take advantage or not want to take advantage of the different topics that are in there, depending on the date. So that can be important for your planning. Then the 4th item, next slide, is keep up with these so-called interim final rules, which I think is just a great name for rules, the interim final. And what you can find is that go on Google and start typing in 3245-AH34-AH35 and so on. And we're all the way up to, I think, AH48 now. And that will tell you what all is out there. And every one of those rules adds more information about the program. A lot of the frequently asked questions get incorporated into those interim final rules. You also want to be on the lookout that Treasury throws a few rules in there once in a while. And so their series is being numbered 1505-AC. And so there's an AC 67 and an AC 69. So that's a real good thing to be tracking and keeping track of what are the interim final rules. And you'll find that before they get published in the Federal Register, you'll find drafts of them out there directly from SBA or whatever agency. And then once it gets published in the Federal Register, you'll see it with its formal publication page number and so forth in the Federal Register. And so that's always really handy, I think, to see what's going on. And if I can, I think, give an example. No, we'll come back to an example, but that that's a pretty nice way to keep up what's going on. They're written pretty easily to read, so they're not particularly like some of the acts will go in cross-referencing to odd numbers and so forth. These interim final rules are written so that you can actually understand them in general, I think. Go to the next slide. But the problem you're going to run into, and I presume most people have heard about this, is that, oh, there's the IRS weighed in when the PPP came out, and they issued IRS Notice 2020-32. And what that's saying is we're going to take away 1/3 of the loan forgiveness, bottom line. How do they do that? The Congress specifically said that the loan forgiveness is tax exempt, period. It's written right into the act. But the IRS also has a longstanding tradition that if you have tax exempt income, the expenses that you spend to generate that income are not deductible. So IRS said, loan forgiveness, well, that's income. So, oh, that's tax exempt. Therefore, the expenses that you're incurring, which are the exact amount of loan forgiveness, are non-deductible. So in other words, they took the legislative intent of making it tax-free and turned it taxable. So what does that mean? It means you got to be thinking that if you have, say, $100,000 of loan forgiveness that you're expecting, recalibrate that back down to being probably about $65,000 of loan forgiveness net effect after you factor in the tax impact. Was this the legislative intent? Probably not. But what's interesting is that Congress didn't address this in either of the two amendments. And I think if Congressman Master were available, he'd probably say, we didn't even have the chance to be able to do it. And it's true. And the nice thing about those amendments is they're very clean and simple, but they didn't address this tax issue. So it's significant for loan forgiveness. Can we go on to number 6? Didn't come out real good on the slide from what I can see, but it says be aware of unanswered questions. For example, if you go through all these different interim final rules, you'll find in volume 85, page 21749 of the Federal Register, the little areas that I have circled in red say, what is a business utility payment? Because that's a forgivable expense. And they give an example. It says it's the cost of electricity in the warehouse you rent or gas you use driving your business vehicle. This was a little phrase that they dropped in when you were trying to figure out how much to make for the loan. They weren't talking about the forgiveness at that point, but they used the exact language. And the unanswered question to the SBA is, hey, did you really mean this? Can we deduct as utility expenses costs of business vehicles? If you have a fleet of trucks or you have cars that you're driving around for business, is that considered utility? I tried contacting, just out of curiosity, our local SBA representative here in St. Lucie County, and he said, got me, I don't know. And then I asked, well, how do you get a question posed to SBA that can become part of the FAQ? And again, the response was, I don't know. So my point here is you have to be careful of these things. There are potential opportunities, but there's also a lot of detail that you have to really think through carefully, and you would want to consult accountants, CPAs, and attorneys if you have any specifics. And then the other thing would be, as Congressman Masters indicated, certainly can pose it to him, because SBA is most definitely overwhelmed. There's just not intended to be dealing with this gigantic size of programs that they are. So then 7th item that I'd suggest to you is look to the American Institute of CPAs. I'm a CPA, I belong to the AICPA, and I gotta say, it's really worthwhile what my trade association is doing right now. You don't have to be a member of this, you don't have to be a CPA, just go to aicpa.org and go look up, find the Coronavirus Resource Center. There's all sorts of good information for business owners, managers, finance, non-finance people, small business individuals. It's really, really good site. I'm really very, very pleased with what the ICPA has done here. Can you go on to the next slide? Specifically from the ICPA, they have a loan forgiveness calculator. And that thing's really good because you're trying to figure out, oh man, how much do I do? How do I figure this number? What's supposed to go into the payroll numbers, etc. The ICPA has that really well laid out. It's a gigantor workbook though. It's not just a simple little spreadsheet. And one of the things I note over on the left side of this slide, you want to make sure you keep up to date on that because they're constantly updating that workbook. So what might be correct today might not be correct tomorrow. And they also are candidly working out some bugs. So we had some problems initially in there, and then we saw that, oh, wait a minute, it only will take 7 employees. And so then we added and said, okay, you can now put in as many employees as you need. Figured that workbook wasn't too helpful if it's only going to accommodate 7 employees. So I do encourage you to use that. The 9th item, well, I'll show you the workbook. This slide here shows a little bit of what it looks like. So it is fairly complicated. It's not something easy to do, but you can walk through it step by step. The 9th item, then the next slide. You get this whole workbook and the loan forgiveness, and what do you do with it? It's not going to generate the form for you. What I think is a really good resource is go to ppp.bank, ppp.bank, not .com, but .bank. And that thing will allow you to type in the information that you want, and it'll generate a loan forgiveness form, pretty much signature ready. So that's pretty cool. It was Mark Cuban from the Dallas Mavericks and Shark Tank. Him and a couple other firms put this together, and I went through and looked at it. I was like, wow, this is pretty nice. My recommendation to folks on the line here would be use that AICPA a forgiveness calculator and the other tools that they have, and then combine it with this PPP bank, and that may get you pretty far along with generating your loan forgiveness requests, because I think that's what a lot of folks are interested in. They're very glad to get the loan at very reasonable terms, but if you can get loan forgiveness, wow, that's even better. So I'd highly recommend that website, PPP Bank. One more thing, I said 9, but I'm going to do a 10th thing. PPP, the Triple P Flexibility Act consideration. I'd be wary of it. It certainly is better than what it was, but there are some pitfalls, and I wanted to bring one in particular to everybody's attention. The Flexibility Act is very simple, but that simplicity creates a trap. Congress originally intended to provide about 2.5 months or 11 weeks of funding, and they said originally you had 8 weeks to spend it. Well, and then you had this requirement for payroll. Well, the Flexibility Act says, you know what, you can spend it over 24 weeks. Great. But there are some requirements. The so-called covered period, originally 8 weeks, now being 24 weeks. It has 2 significant measurements in there. The first is that you have to maintain certain minimum number of employees. And as Congressman Mass indicated, it actually gives you more flexibility because it allows you to go all the way to the end of December to get that number of employees up to where it should be. But suppose you had 8 weeks, you got the people up to that, and then your business got hit later on. If you elected that 24 weeks, you're faced with now you've failed the test. The other rule that's in there in that 24 weeks is that you have to maintain a certain rate of pay for all your employees. Well, I take it back, it's not all employees, it's certain employees that are on your payroll during the first quarter of 2020. And it's an employee by employee test, not the employees as a group, but employee by employee. So the Flexibility Act, while it says you have 24 weeks to spend the money that you got from the PPP, It also says if you take this 24-week option, you are agreeing that the government is going to be watching how you're paying each one of those individual employees for 24 weeks. That's a heck of a lot more than just having the government watch you for 8 weeks. So you have to think about that with a little bit of a carefulness with the government. The good news is you don't have to make that election up front. You can certainly go out and watch how it rolls out over the remaining weeks, and then you choose. You choose it when you make your forgiveness application. So it's not like you have to decide right now, ooh, are we going to do the 24-week version or are we going to do the 8-week version? You certainly have that choice. Now, if you're just getting a new loan now, you don't really have that choice. You've got the 24-week only. But for the vast majority of PPP recipients, you have both the 8-week and the 24-week choice. The thing it could be is you could end up being that you spend all the money, and then in the later weeks, you run out of money, your company can't pay it, and now you failed the test, meaning that what you thought was going to be the loan forgiveness reverts back to just a loan. So it's something to be thinking about. And it's, again, as the name indicates, flexibility. It's not a bad thing, but it is something you have to be wary of. And that's those are the topics that I wanted to pass along, Jill.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was really very informative. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Tom? Feel free to open your microphone. We are a no question group. I think everybody's digesting all of this information today. Tom, that was really great.
Jill, this is Pete. Could this PowerPoint presentation that Tom has, can we make that available on our website, or if somebody wants it? I'm sure you could probably take it off of GoToMeeting, but this is pretty valuable stuff. Thank you, Tom.
My pleasure.
Are you okay, Tom, that we'll be sharing the audio and we'll share this PowerPoint as well so that folks that may have not been able to attend will be able to get this valuable information as well?
Yeah, certainly. I want to make because being the careful account, I want to make a correction on the very last page. I'll email that to you.
Perfect. Sounds great. Anybody have any questions? Everybody good? Tom, we thank you so much again. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being a great peer and jumping on the call today and providing this information. If anyone thinks of any questions afterwards, please feel free to shoot it to our office and we'll make sure to get you an answer. With that, I'll just hand it back to Pete to close up with anything, and wish you all a very great week.
Thanks, Jill. Our appreciation to Congressman Mast and Tom Senate for the very valuable information that they shared with us. We wish you all a great evening, and we look forward to the next virtual happy half hour, Jill. So thanks to you and Jen for hosting us this afternoon.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good.